Tony Stark snapped his fingers and died. But what if he didn't? What if Iron Man walked away from Endgame alive? Today, we rewrite everything. Welcome back. If you're new here, we do deep dive Marvel what-if stories that the show never touched. Hit subscribe so you don't miss them. Today's question has haunted every MCU fan since April 2019. Tony Stark's death in Avengers Endgame was the emotional centerpiece of an 11-year journey. It was perfect storytelling. But perfect doesn't mean necessary. What if Tony lived? What would his life look like? How would it change the Avengers? Would Peter Parker finally get his mentor back? And most importantly, what new threats would emerge in a world where Tony Stark is still building, still fighting, still being Iron Man? Let's break it all down, start to finish. The moment plays out exactly as we know it. Thanos looks at his empty gauntlet. Tony looks at his hand. He takes the stones. But here's where this timeline splits. In the months after the Infinity War, Tony had quietly upgraded his nanotech suit with something he never told the team about. An emergency arc field, a layer of energy shielding designed to absorb catastrophic power surges. He built it after almost dying in space. He built it because he was always afraid this moment was coming. When the 6 stones discharge through his body, the arc field activates in milliseconds. It doesn't block the energy. Nothing could block all of it. But it absorbs enough, just enough, that instead of killing Tony, the blast burns out his left arm, destroys 3 ribs, and puts him in cardiac arrest for 47 seconds. Thanos is gone. His army is gone. Peter Parker is standing in the rubble, crying over a man who is not yet dead. Bruce Banner restarts Tony's heart. Shuri stabilizes him on the battlefield. Tony is airlifted to Wakanda's med bay, where he spends the next 11 weeks unconscious. When he wakes up, his left arm ends at the elbow. Shuri has already designed a vibranium prosthetic. Tony looks at it for a long time, then says, "Make it gold." No, red and gold. Nobody laughs. Everyone smiles. Tony Stark is alive. Tony surviving reshapes everything around him like a stone dropped in water. Steve Rogers doesn't go back in time to live out his life. In canon, Steve's retirement is a quiet goodbye. The team has Tony's legacy, Sam has the shield, and Steve feels his chapter is done. But in this timeline, with Tony alive and the team still whole, Steve stays. Captain America stays. And the dynamic between him and Tony is immediately complicated. 2 leaders, 2 visions, 1 team. They argue constantly about jurisdiction, about oversight, about who gets final call. But here's what's different. They've both been to the edge now. They don't break. Not again. The arguments are loud, but the trust underneath them is solid. Meanwhile, Tony quietly redirects his energy. He's not done building. He's just building differently. Less weapons, more infrastructure. He creates Stark Grid, a global early warning system that monitors dimensional, biological, and extraterrestrial threats in real time. He funds Peter Parker's university tuition without telling him it's from him. He mentors Shuri through a joint engineering project, a vibranium nanotech hybrid that neither of them fully understands yet, but both of them know is important. Tony also does something nobody expects. He calls Wanda Maximoff. In canon, Wanda loses vision and spirals alone. In this timeline, Tony reaches out 6 months after the battle. He doesn't offer her a cure. He doesn't offer her therapy. He just says, "I know what it's like to carry something that almost killed everyone around you. I'm not going anywhere if you want to talk." It's a conversation that stops Westview from ever happening. Doctor Strange finds Tony 8 months after the battle. He doesn't knock. He simply appears in the kitchen of the Stark Lake House at 6 a.m., which Tony describes as genuinely unforgivable behavior. Strange explains it plainly. Tony's survival has created a fracture. In every other timeline, Tony Stark dies at this moment. That death is a fixed point. It anchors the multiverse. Now that he's alive, variants of that moment are bleeding through, and something is using those fractures as doors. The threat that steps through is not calm. It's not a villain with a name yet. It's a version of Tony Stark from a collapsed timeline. A Tony who died exactly as he was supposed to, was somehow resurrected by an unknown force, and has spent 5 years alone in a dying universe, watching everything he loved fade without him. Call him the Remnant. The Remnant doesn't want to destroy this timeline. He wants to correct it. He believes Tony's survival here is a mistake, an error the universe hasn't fixed yet, and he's come to fix it himself. What follows is the most psychologically brutal fight in any what-if scenario. Tony Stark versus the version of himself that went through everything he feared most. Same mind, same hands, same voice. But one chose to keep going, and one decided that survival without purpose is just a longer death. Every accusation the Remnant throws lands because it comes from inside. Every wound feels self-inflicted. The Remnant doesn't fight dirty. He fights honest, and that's worse. The turning point comes from Peter. Peter steps between them. He looks at the Remnant, this broken, furious version of his mentor, and says quietly, "He taught me that the job isn't to win. It's to show up. You stopped showing up." The Remnant goes still. Tony doesn't destroy him. He can't. He opens a controlled multiverse fracture, Strange guides it, and sends the Remnant through to a timeline where Pepper survived instead of Tony. A place where someone is waiting. A place that might still have room for him. It's not a victory. It's an act of mercy, which is very, very Tony Stark. The story ends on a Tuesday afternoon. Nothing special about it. Tony is in the garage at the lake house. Morgan is 10. She hands him a wrench and asks what they're building today. Tony looks at the half-finished repulsor on the workbench, then at his daughter, then back at the repulsor. "Whatever you want," he says. Morgan grins. "Then I want a jetpack." "That's completely unreasonable," Tony says. He picks up the wrench. "Where do we start?" No armor, no crisis, no world ending. Just a man who was supposed to die, choosing every single day not to. That's the story that Endgame never got to tell. So, does Tony deserve to live? Or does his death make the MCU what it is? Tell me in the comments. Every reply gets read. If you want more stories like this, subscribe. New What If every week. See you there.